Welcome to the Youth-Centrics Trauma-Informed Care series. In this deep dive, we discuss if critical race theory is racist and the relationships between racism, trauma, and effects on people's daily lives. The 2020 deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and several others, launched the United States and the world, really, into deep conversation about a long history of anti-Black racism, funding priorities, and system change. Though schools were virtual due to COVID, the social justice movement of 2020 entered American schools and has engaged students around the globe. The 2021 school year is expected to include more formal education about racism and its role in our nation's history and current climate. Some are anxious about including racism in the curriculum. While the average activist is promoting racial justice in education, the popular opposition has shifted to critical race theory. To date, at least 11 states have expressed interest in banning critical race theory or have already passed laws banning the use of CRT in American public schools. School board meetings across the country have erupted in anger and tears. Parents have expressed concern that critical race theory is causing Americans to mistrust their neighbors and causing children to hate themselves. How did we get to this place of angst, anger, shame, and resentment? So let's start by asking, what is critical race theory? A framework for critical race theory was formally published in 2001. The theory began as a way of critiquing the American legal system. Let's follow the logic of the legal theorists to get to if and how CRT is relevant to education. We'll use drug policy as a theme to investigate the racial lines of the law. Critical race theory is a body of scholarship that promotes the idea that race, and particularly racism, are the foundation for present-day society. Society, of course, includes all aspects of daily living: work, relationships, law, family, finances, religion, education, and so on. If racism is the foundation of society, that suggests that racism determines how people are likely to be treated depending on their race. Racism determines what knowledge gets shared and with whom. Racism would determine which ways of being are considered normal and acceptable, and who receives resources and protections. Like many theories that take a critical approach to history and how current systems came to be, critical race theory proposes that because of European aims at expansion, colonization, the enslavement of Black people that made it possible, and myriad laws that enforced white supremacy between 1400 through the 1900s, white people, people of European descent, received the most protection, benefits, and social validation. Overall, critical race theory suggests that the present-day social order creates avoidable adversity for adults and avoidable risk for developing children, particularly for non-white people and especially for Black people globally. It's implied that white people who resist white racial norms experience hardships for failing to conform to those norms in their treatment of others and in the cultural norms they adopt for themselves, such as how they speak, how they dress, what races they choose for intimate partners, and so on. These moral and lifestyle choices can separate white people from their families, cause loss of friends, and potentially cause emotional distress from those losses. So, with all of that, does the data support CRT and other claims about racism? Well, since no one wants to be accused of playing the victim or playing the race card, critical thinkers about race, history, and racism have used data to make their case for change. In their analysis of how American laws were written, enforced, tried in courts, and punished, critical thinkers outline the effects of law enforcement on different populations. They look at white populations, Black populations, and other non-white people groups. The theorists suggest that Black Americans especially received harsher treatment in the application of laws, more frequently experienced general punishment, and experience exclusion from all social groups. Critical thinkers conclude that because of greater punishment, Black communities and families experience more profound negative impact from American law creation and enforcement. This means that Black children and at least one parent are more affected by the American legal system than their white counterparts when all other non-racial factors are similar in an incident related to the law. Examples that can be cited include the 100-to-1 difference between rock cocaine and powder cocaine. The 2010 Fair Sentencing Act, signed by President Barack Obama, decreased that disparity from 100-to-1 to 18-to-1. In 2018, the First Step Act, signed by President Donald Trump, allowed people who were already convicted using the 100-to-1 ratio to request resentencing using the 8-year-old 18-to-1 ratio. But the act didn't eliminate the disparity altogether. If you're asking what allowed the disparity to happen, consider this. Because of media portrayals, rock cocaine, crack, is stereotypically associated with Black and poor substance users, though according to statistics, white people use crack slightly more than Black people do, but Black people are convicted more often than any other group. Powder cocaine is associated with white, chic, and wealthy substance users. White and affluent people use powder cocaine more than the typical Black person does and more than poor people can. Race and economics are only part of the picture. Trauma is the missing piece of the equation. If a substance user is poor, they are already struggling to make ends meet, to provide basic necessities while coping with life challenges. Research suggests that struggling for basic resources can increase the risk of childhood adversity and trauma. You may benefit from watching our earlier video where I answer the question, what is trauma, and describe how adversity can become trauma. Early and overwhelming adversities can predict life struggle across the lifespan. Early adversity can predict that substance use or substance abuse may become a coping strategy. In fact, research shows that people with multiple adverse childhood experiences, that is, ACEs, were more likely to use illicit drugs before age 18, and those with 5 or more ACEs were 7 to 10 times more likely to report use of illicit drugs or report having a drug addiction. A male with 5 or more adverse childhood experiences was 46 times more likely to become an IV drug user. More recent research into ACEs shows that Black adults and Black children are at greater risk for adverse childhood experiences, including racism and neighborhood level instability. That instability can often be traced back to racism that affected home purchases and affected lending for home improvements. Financially insecure neighborhoods are more likely to become havens for crime and punishment. More examples of the different racial impact of laws include the fact that Black substance users are more likely to receive jail time, whereas white substance users are more likely to be referred to substance use treatment or referred to therapy for underlying mental health concerns. This empathetic sentencing recognizes that jail time could negatively affect a white person's daily living and hurt their future. That means a white family is more likely to maintain a standard of living. Their dependent kin or family won't lose an essential care provider. Conviction negatively affects a household and those who depend upon the convicted or imprisoned person for support with living expenses, health care, transportation, child supervision, old age, and so on. More recent legislation for opioid use and addiction is another example for how drug laws have different impacts based on racial lines. The federal government took a public health response to highly addictive opioid use rather than criminalizing users. For example, methadone, a drug used to counteract opioid overdose, is widely available. Health professionals are instructed to prioritize treatment over referring to law enforcement. Thankfully, the public health response has saved many lives from opioid overdose, yet race is behind the health response to this drug epidemic. Between 1999 and 2019, white Americans made up the vast majority of opioid users and opioid-related deaths. As of July 2021, during the Joe Biden presidency, the 18-to-1 difference between crack cocaine and powder cocaine is still in place. People made all of these decisions and wrote all of these policies that lead to racial differences in how people are treated. Critical race theory and other critical frameworks like it are intent on getting us to acknowledge that these disparities exist. The ultimate goal being the elimination of disparities and preventing the unnecessary trauma that racial disparities can cause. So, why is CRT being criticized? And what do racial disparities in legislation, drug-related law enforcement, and sentencing have to do with education? So there isn't a simple single factor at play, but the answer centers on punishment, exclusion, and disparities in treatment. For one thing, like in the legal system, when compared to their white and non-Black peers who commit the same, similar, or more severe actions, Black students are more likely to be punished by public ridicule, be removed from the classroom, be referred to the principal's office, suspended, or even have police called to their school. These differences in treatment cause students to see adult authorities as unfair and experience school as unsafe and not for them. Critical conversations about the history and racial impact of things seeks to eliminate these differences in treatment by spurring deeper conversations that prompt changes in policy that ensure quick changes in practices to achieve a fair and just education system for all. These disparities in treatment and social outcomes happened over decades, if not centuries, of policies that negatively affected some families. Those same policies benefited other families in ways they may not be consciously aware of. Critical conversations about the history and relationships between peoples are relevant to education because schools shape the mindset of future legislators who determine sentencing guidelines and fund law enforcement priorities. They set a foundation for the beliefs of future presidents who sign laws that affect different racial groups differently. They build the critical thinking abilities of future law enforcement officers who carry out legislative mandates. Schools mold the minds of judges and jurors who are either blind to, choose to obey, or decide to resist unjust sentencing guidelines. Schools and the materials we use in them influence future curriculum writers and book publishers who will either repeat or debunk the stereotypes and tell a fuller interpretation of history. Those who support telling the racialized history of things are attempting to serve two overarching ends where race is concerned. First, they are attempting to open the hearts and minds of adults and parents who are the current decision makers about people's lives. Today's parents are the present day jurors, judges, law enforcement officers, neighbors, teachers, healthcare providers, and so on. Secondly, critical race theorists and thinkers aim to avoid future negative impact by sharpening the minds of the next generation of decision makers. Part of the criticism about CRT is the way it is used. Another part is the fact that critical theories about racism exist at all. So, how are children, educators, and families affected by critical conversations about racism? This year is the first time many folks have heard of critical race theory. Many parents, board members, and legislators find themselves being accused of racist words and behavior when they've never burned a cross on anyone's lawn. They try to treat everyone the same. They have Black friends and Black family members, and they believe they don't see race. For them, it feels like a personal attack to say that a whole group of people benefit from and practice racism. For some, talking points about white supremacy land as a blow to their child's self-concept and feels like individuals being placed in a box labeled racist. The emerging trend of telling the racialized history of things is uncomfortable, and honestly, sometimes it's a bit clumsy. Remember, no one taught us how to do this at all, let alone how to do it well. Critical conversations about race and racism need to also build adults' capacity to help children process the realities of the history that is being shared for the first time. What follows the critical conversations is action. Critical conversations about race and history are a means to an end. That end is a desired future state where people are treated fairly without regard to race, and the harm caused from previous maltreatment has been acknowledged and repaired. For the most part, we Americans are not taught how to openly talk about race and racism. We pretend not to notice such things. Essentially, we are expected to treat each other well while not seeing the wholeness of our relationship partners. We've essentially been blindfolded, not colorblind, hoping for the best while not acknowledging the messy history of our people groups. Black Americans and other non-white people generally say they want their personal and professional relationship partners to see their race and to acknowledge and see the history of their people group. While there are several reasons to critique critical race theory, the theory itself is not racist. It is one way of sparking much needed conversation about the elephant in the room. That elephant is made up of the need to fully be seen as a person and the call to move beyond lip service with our desire to treat people well without regard to race. To begin to digest that elephant, we have to lean into the uncomfortable moments with courage. Critical conversations about race and racism are a call to accept the complex history and legacy of our nation, acknowledging that our history has created adversities and traumas that we didn't cause, but we've inherited. Always recognizing while none of us were taught to do this well, it's now our time to make things right. If you'd like to learn more about adverse childhood experiences, including racial inequity and effects psychological trauma has on daily living, register for our upcoming live trauma responsive training. In the session, you will focus on routes to address personal trauma and heal our system. Certificates of completion are available. The registration link is in the description box and in the pinned comment below. Register now, join live, watch later. New events are announced at eventbrite.com, on Facebook at YouthCentrics, or on Twitter at YouthCentrics. Click the follow button while you're there. Are you a business leader interested in bringing trauma-informed care and equity to your organization? Reach out to us at www.youthcentrics.com to get started. If you found this video insightful or you disagree, react to the video and put a comment in the comment section below. Tell us below about the impact trauma has had on you and your loved ones. What about the impact of CRT? Share this with others who need to hear this message, and take a second right now to click the red subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss out on insights for healing and change. Until next time, stay safe and well.